It's another political campaign season. Now, I don't know about you, but every time I turn on the news, I get bombarded with the latest poll results. Who's up and who's down. So this seems like the right time, before we deliberate, to have a talk on political polls. I'm going to tell you three things about them: the types, the reliability, and the special rules that come into play when an incumbent is on the ballot. Now, there are basically three types of political polls. Now, one type of political poll is a poll of the population at large. And if you'll see it in writing, you'll see the letter A in the small print, and that stands for adults. Now, the problem with this kind of a poll is we don't know how many of those adults are eligible voters. We might as well poll the people in Iceland. Unfortunately, a lot of the polls that are put out there are polls of this type. Now, another type of poll is a poll of registered voters. R stands RV. Now, that's a lot better poll because these people can actually vote. However, there's still a problem with this kind of a poll because a lot of people that are registered to vote, guess what? They don't vote. So sometimes as many as 50% or more. So the most preferable kind of poll is a poll of likely voters. Now, how do we determine if somebody's a likely voter? Well, you question them. Are you planning to vote? Did you vote in the last election? A lot of times, dependent in determining who a likely voter is the skill of the questioner. Okay, let's say we've got a poll of likely voters or registered voters. How reliable is it? Now, in order for a poll to be reliable, it has to be based, the sample has to be based on a representative cross-section of the electorate. If not, it's going to be wildly skewed. Let me give you a simple example of a skewed poll. Let's say we have a ballot initiative about capital punishment, as to whether we should have it or not. And let's say we do a poll. And then in our sample, 50% of the people we polled are relatives of death row inmates. Well, you can see that we wildly oversampled that subgroup of death row, relatives of death row inmates way above what they would be in the normal population. We've oversampled. And so we're going to have skewed result. Now, in the last election, last national election, which was in 2010, the actual breakdown of voters along party lines was Democrats 36%, Republicans 36%, and Independents 28%. Now that number varies from election to election. However, in modern times, these numbers usually stay in the 30 percentile range, give or take a few points here and there. However, many of the polls that you see out there are based on samples in which one political party or another, there'd be over 50% of the respondents would be members of one political party or another. So they're wildly skewed against one political party or in favor of another political party. Unfortunately, the news media never discloses to you that there's this oversampling occurring. Now, why would anybody oversample like that? Well, I think the primary reason is just, it's really hard when you're polling every night or every week to get a correct breakdown of the polling numbers, and you have deadlines in the media. So I think there's pressure to just throw it out there, irregardless of whether you got the right breakdown or not. Some cynics do say that sometimes this oversampling is done intentionally to influence potential voters, but let you make your mind on that. Now that we've talked about the types of polls and the reliability of polls, now there's some special rules that come into play if an incumbent is one of the candidates. It's called the incumbent rule. Now I'm going to give you an example here. And to make it easy, mathematically easy for myself more than for you, is that we're going to make the assumption that this is primarily a two-person race and there's no major third party. So, and we're also going to assume that we did a correct sample. So our poll results is showing 47% plan to vote for the incumbent, 43% plan to vote for the challenger, and 10% are undecided. Who's ahead? Who's likely to win with those poll results? The media will usually represent to you that incumbent is ahead and likely to win. That's probably wrong. There's been lots of studies, in fact, thousands of pre-election polls have been examined, and it's been found that 80% of the time, undecided voters vote for the challenger in the end. Now, so applying that ratio to our example here, we take 80% here, the likely result is going to be 51-49. Whereas the news media sometimes incorrectly describes it, there was a late surge to the challenger. Now, there's a special corollary to this rule. That's when it's a presidential election. And they've studied presidential elections over the last half century, and they find that in every instance except one, when the incumbent was an incumbent president on the ballot, 100% of the undecided vote went to the challenger. So in our scenario, the results would be 53-47 the popular vote. And it makes a lot of sense when you think about it for that incumbent rule to be in play, because, for example, let's say we had a husband or wife that we interviewed, and we asked them, and they've been married 4 or more years to their spouse. We asked them, do you plan to stay with your spouse? I'm undecided. I say you might have some problems with that relationship. Unfortunately, a lot of the reasons we see a lot of negative campaigning is because political insiders know this, the likely scenario in this case, and then what you do is you have to bombard the challenger to make sure that these undecided voters either don't go over. You want to make the challenger basically radioactive. And so you bombard with negative advertising to make sure these undecided voters either get disgusted and just stay home because they're dangerous, or that they decide to go string along with the incumbent. So I've told you about the types of polls, told you about the reliability poll, and the special rules that apply when an incumbent is on the ballot. And so hopefully the next time that you see a poll, you'll be better able to know what, if anything, that poll is really telling you. Mr. Toastmaster.